Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Crown and today we are going to have some more stories that I hope that you will enjoy. But before we start, it will be so much appreciated if you would subscribe to the channel, like the video if you enjoyed it, and maybe leave a comment down below. These simple clicks would mean a lot to the future of this channel and really reward the effort that I put in every day. And now, without further ado, let's go! One afternoon, while returning from my local computer parts shop, I had this woman behind me honking like mad. I noticed in my rearview mirror that she was hitting her steering wheel and looked very frustrated. My initial thought was, oh crap, did I do something and not realize it? That wouldn't be like me, but why else would she be freaking out the way she is? As I pulled into my condo's parking lot, I decided to pull over and figure out what was happening. Why she was freaking out like that. As I pulled over, she did as well. However, before she was stopped, her door was open and she made an attempt to get out, only stopping once she realized her car was not in park. She got back in, put her car in park, then got out again, this time running towards me. I leaned out to my window and just as I was about to ask her what was wrong, I received an open hand slap right across the face. At this point, some ugly thoughts on how I would react ran through my mind, but so did the high likelihood that I would be arrested if I followed through with them. So I decided that I would do the mature thing and report this psycho to the police. As I tried exiting my car, she tried slamming my door on my legs. Fortunately, she was a very tiny woman at about 5'2" and no more than 100 pounds. I was easily double her size and didn't have difficulty overpowering her attempts to crush my legs in the door. I walked to the back of her car to record her license so I could report her to the police. The whole time I was doing that, she was pushing and slapping me and yelling incoherent gibberish. I tried asking her several times what her deal was, but each time she said something that included swears but didn't make sense. Finally, she said a coherent sentence and claimed she was a cop. It didn't matter. I was still reporting her, cop or not. As I was writing her license plate number, a car showed up and the guy driving asked me if I needed help. I was kind of shocked since I was way bigger than this girl and automatically assumed anyone seeing it would assume she was a victim. As I was talking to this guy, she got in her car and reversed it quickly and directly at me. I ran behind this guy's car, narrowly being missed by her car. She then peeled out of there, but not before I got her plate. The witness gave me his information and left. Then, as I got back in my car, another vehicle started honking at me. I was already rattled from the first situation but decided to see what this was about. As it turns out, there was another witness asking me if I'm alright. He said he saw every bit of it and gave me his information. I returned home and called the police, who arrived in a timely 4 hours. There was no emergency, so no big deal. The officer that arrived told me that the plate I gave her was registered to someone in the same building as me. She asked me to identify the car in my garage if it was there, so we did the walkthrough and I spotted it. She left to go speak to the owner of that vehicle and returned about 45 minutes later. The officer told me the woman was not home according to her boyfriend. The officer had called the witnesses, who corroborated my side of events and was pressing assault charges. When I explained that I was clueless as to why this happened, the officer explained that she had seen similar events before, and it was usually because a person was high on some type of hard drug like crack, meth, or heroin. Over the coming weeks, I was in constant communication with the officer, who explained that this woman was getting married 2 days after the incident occurred. Due to all kinds of delays like that and slow court system, it was nearly a year later before it went to court. A few days prior to the court date, the officer called me and explained that she also had a witness who claimed they were in a car with her and saw me attack her. The officer said she doesn't buy the Karen story, and it's likely the judge wouldn't, but still warned me, so I prepared myself. The day of the court case, I was sitting in the hallway waiting for my turn to take the stand. Also in the same area was a girl. Since there are about 8 courtrooms in the same vicinity, I never thought much of it, but luckily for me, I was advised to keep my phone on record mode because the possibility that Karen could come to try to taunt me was high. As she is, that would be an evidence of great value. Then the girl started talking to me and said she was there to be a witness for her friend. She then told me she didn't actually witness anything, but her friend was in serious trouble and needed someone to back her story up, or she could be going to jail. She then asked me why I was there, and I explained I was the person her friend attacked, and the one she was about to commit perjury against to support her friend. There were two guys sitting next to us. They looked over and again backed me up by explaining to that girl what her friend did and what can happen if you commit perjury. She refused to testify when she was called, as did the other witness, but I did have that recording. The judge gave her a $5,000 fine and 1,000 community hours, and said that if she didn't join into a rehab program and an anger management program within a week after the completion of her community hours, she's going to jail. The petty revenge part was about 3 years later. We sold our condo but kept the key to the garage. We snuck in and let the air out of her tires. Mrs. Spike was a PE/health teacher for me grades 8 to 12s, and also for my brothers for most of those years. She ended her reign of terror 2 years ago. A story here reminded me of her, so I figured I would tell Reddit about her. Mrs. Spike chose her favorite students at the beginning of their 8th grade year. I was not one of those golden children, and neither were any of my siblings. If you were a favorite, you got an A+ no matter what. If she didn't care for you, you had to do all the volunteer activities and extra credit assignments to get above C-. Her least favorites? Me and one of my brothers included. We were picked on relentlessly. She would lose our assignments and doctor notes, and she loved it. Mrs. Spike did not teach properly either. Everything she taught was outdated, and when someone who wasn't her boss tried to correct her, she would send them to the office and/or ignore them. My first story is from when I was a sophomore in high school. I had hit my head during basketball practice and gotten a concussion. I had a note from not only the doctor, the school nurse, my basketball coach, my parents, and my grandma too. I think it was so that she couldn't say she didn't know. It did not work. I was not allowed to participate in PE that day because of my concussion and having not been able to keep anything down. Mrs. Spike looked at all the notes and decided not to believe me or any of the adults. She told me that I would fail her class if I did not participate in class that day. It was kickball, and not even 10 minutes into the class, I started getting dizzy. Everything was blurry, even with my glasses on, and everything sounded like I was hearing through a pair of seashells. Mrs. Spike, I need to sit down. I said to her, "You can sit down when the game is over." "I don't think that I can." "Next kicker," she shouted over me. The game went on for a few more minutes and I was barely existing. I was leaning against the wall closest to the base I was supposed to be guarding. I was sweaty, shaky, dizzy, and nauseous. The world started to fall away. Some of my classmates were shouting at Mrs. Spike. Didn't learn until later that they were yelling at her to tell her that I needed to go to the nurse. One of the guys called her an idiot. He was no longer one of her favorites after that day. One of the girls in the class poked me and helped me walk to the locker room. I promptly vomited into my gym locker. After that, I dragged myself to the office and asked to call my grandma. Grandma is now Mary. I laid in the nurse's office for about 5 to 10 minutes while my grandma Mary came to my rescue. As we were getting into the car, Mrs. Spike came up to us with my purse. "I'm sorry, Mary and OP. I really thought you would be okay. I thought OP had forged those notes." Mrs. Spike, my granddaughter can barely write in her own hand, let alone nurse, mom, dad, doc, and me. You are lucky that I'm not on the school board. I would have you kicked out of here and onto the streets. Grandma told her. She took my purse from Mrs. Spike, climbed up into her Suburban, and slammed the door. I climbed in after her and we went home. I did not go back to school until the next Tuesday. The next Miss Spike story is from almost exactly a year later. I was stuck in her PE class once again because the world is cruel. We were all hanging out in a gym, sitting on the bleachers, waiting for class to start. When it was time to start, my klutzy self-rolled my left ankle when I was getting down. I told Mrs. Spike what I had done and that my ankle hurt way more than it should.
You're just trying to get out of running.
She told me this and then turned to the whole class.
1 mile run. Whoever finishes first gets out of class 5 minutes early.
I was a good student and still hate causing trouble. So I ran. She was timing 5 people, including me. As I forced myself to run, it felt like someone was using a heavy hammer on my ankle. I was trying not to cry the whole time. Doing my best wasn't good enough for Mrs. Spike.
Oh, B, you didn't do a fast enough mile to pass a class. I want you to run it again.
Mrs. Spike said. Mrs. Spike, my ankle really hurts. I think I need to see the nurse.
Stop complaining and do what I said.
Another mile doubled the pain. Who would have thought, right? The second mile was worse because I fell several times, making my ankle hurt more. You'll never guess what she wanted me to do next. She wanted me to run another mile. I limped the mile, and she finally accepted it because class was over by the time I came back. I'm pretty sure my ankle was broken that day, just not badly enough to turn at a strange angle. To this day, my ankle still hurts when I'm on my feet too long and when it's cold. 1 week later, we were lifting weights for some reason. Strange because we have been running in circles and jumping over stuff for the last 3 weeks, and weightlifting was not on the syllabus. Well, I didn't and still don't lift weights often and do not enjoy it. I was talking with another student when Mrs. Spong decided that my somewhat limply raised hand, also my left funnily enough, looked prepared to hold the dumbbell. I cried out in pain at the sudden weight in my hand, and also pain in my wrist as it dragged me towards the ground.
You're not supposed to drop it like that.
She sighed exasperatedly and picked up the dumbbell that she had dropped on me.
Now do it right.
I had enough, between my wrist and ankle hurting, and her having given me a failing grade on an essay I had corrected. I marched myself to the office. I was given a passing grade for the day and the essay after the nurse looked at my wrist. It too gives me problems even now. The fourth adventure in Mrs. Spike's horrible class is actually my brother's. For the story, he is Jake. Jake is 5 years younger than me. It was his 8th grade health class where this went down. Jake had been bullied through all of elementary school and into middle school by a boy in his class. Duke for the story. Mrs. Spike seemed to love putting Jake and Duke together in class to watch someone else pick on my brother. Jake is a skinny boy with glasses that look like Valma's from Scooby-Doo. He doesn't defend himself. That is what his twin and our other siblings are for. Jake's twin was on the other side of the classroom and Jake was sitting beside Duke. Duke had gotten bored of just verbal bullying, so he decided to sharpen an old number 2 gold pencil really well and stabbed my brother in the arm, just above the elbow. My brother screamed bloody murder.
Jake, you need to be quiet while I'm teaching.
She didn't even turn around. Mrs. Spike, Duke stabbed me in the arm.
Liars, go to the principal's office, Jake.
I want to go to the nurse.
After class.
But I'm bleeding all over the desk.
You are not leaving this classroom until I say so.
And she finally turned around to snap at Jake. I want to call Grandma Mary. Jake started digging in his bag for his phone.
You will not call her or anyone else in my classroom.
Then she moved to stand guard by the door. Duke was laughing his fool's head off the whole time. Jake's twin, who loves all things weightlifting, wrestling, football, and bodybuilding, stomped over and slammed a fist into Duke's desk. Duke shut up and straightened up. The twins and Mrs. Spike argued for the rest of the class. As soon as the bell rang, the twins barreled through Mrs. Spike and into the office. They called our grandma and dad, and this was the incident that ended her career. My family took the stabbing to the school board, and they gathered other students that Mrs. Spike had picked on and failed. Their parents and Duke plus his family. My family demanded that Mrs. Spike be fired and to have Duke expelled. Duke somehow squirmed free of expulsion and was just suspended from school for 2 weeks. Duke's family is rich, so of course he got off with that. Mrs. Spike was fired, however, and she was not allowed within 60 feet of either of the twins. The twins had permission from Dad to hit her if she tried anything again. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.